We're so excited that you're here with us in sunny Orlando, Florida. We are excited about being at the 11th Annual Leadership 500 Summit. Can we give it up for being here in Orlando? Awesome, awesome. So this morning's conversation is really what we hope to be the theme that will drive what we see happening throughout the weekend. But we know that there are some formalities we have to take care of. We're excited about the conversation. I'm going to invite now to the stage one of the architects, one of the visionaries of Leadership 500. She serves not only as the chairman of the NAACP National Board of Directors, she serves as a visionary for the work necessary to engage youth and young adults across the country. Leadership 500, would you join me in welcoming to the stage the chairman of the NAACP National Board of Directors, Ms. Rosalind McAllister Brock.
Everyone. I think I said what I was going to say next door because I didn't know if I was going to say it over here, but hashtag I am the bomb and I know the physician. So that's that hashtag that's going to run through this every day. Good morning. I want to thank you all for being here in this session in the Breakfast on Time. We're going to have a wonderful day learning about the NAACP and its work and race and politics. Just wanted to give some of you a little insight. If you look at your program book, it's RIP. What does that mean? Rest in peace. We want the whole negative constructs of race in American society to do what? Rest in peace. And so as we unpack that throughout this weekend around health, around education, around economic empowerment, around criminal justice, around the environment, we want to have race as a negative construct in American society to go away and to never exist. But we need to name it and claim it and then do something about it. Because there's been so much agony across our nation because of the bloodshed of African American men and boys at the hands of those who wear blue. But I dare say this morning, at the risk of angering some people, we need to get just as indignant when Ray Ray kills Pookie next door. When the hands of the violent offenders looks like ours. We have to raise our voices in unity to stop the black-on-black genocide that's happening at our own hands. And I believe fundamentally that we are the they. As Dr. Richardson said, we are the bomb. We know the answers and we know more than we do. It rests within all of us to just do the work. I appreciate you all for being here. We need to hear from you through this weekend to help us continue to do the work of the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization. We've been around 106 years, and we don't feel no ways tired, but we need some fresh legs, some new ideas, and some thought leadership as we provide this nation with what it needs to stem the tide of the challenges that plague us. My friends, courage must not skip this generation. Peace and power.
Thank you, Chairman Brock, for those words. We know that events of this nature really don't happen. They're not possible without not only the financial support, but the programmatic and content support of so many partners across the country. And we would like to bring to the stage for just a few moments, Mr. Mark Littlejohn, who serves as the Senior Manager for Corporate Affairs, Constituent Relations within the African American community for the Walmart Corporation, to bring us a few words of greetings. Mark.
Good morning. Sorry about my tardiness. I didn't look in the book last night. Thank you so much on behalf of Walmart. We really appreciate this partnership with NAACP and the opportunity to cultivate this next generation of leaders, which is something that we're really focused on right now. This is in particular important to me because I grew up in the NAACP and the Memphis Youth Council when I was around 8 years old, and me and all of my siblings matriculated through. We were in officer positions in undergrad, all through high school, and so this has been very important to me in terms of civic engagement, political activism, and all of that. My first national conference was in '89, and back then, Jamal Harrison Bryant was the Youth and College Division Chair, and we just really used to look up to him. And I just learned so much growing up back then, and I'm really appreciative to the NAACP and the opportunity to sponsor you guys and partner and continuing cultivating this relationship. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to a great conference.
Let's give one more round of applause for our chairman of our national board and our friends at the Walmart Corporation. So when we talk about the notion of Black millennials matter, it's also important that we give note to the fact that young people are also gifted performers. Coming to the stage next is Matthew Cuban Hernandez. He serves as the coach of the Get Lit players, and he hosts open mic events across the country. He is a 3-time Southern Fried Poetry Slam champion. From 2007 to 2011, Matthew founded and coached the Jacksonville Youth Poetry Slam team called Shattered Thought. Through Shattered Thought, he facilitated writing and performance workshops in schools and juvenile detention centers all across the country. And in 2009, he was the youngest coach to ever take a team to the final stage at the Brave New Voices International Poetry Slam. In the summer of 2012, Matthew accepted a residency with the poetry organization Slam Richmond in Richmond, Virginia. He was able to coach their youth team to a 3rd place finish in San Francisco, California at the Brave New Voices International Poetry Slam. Matthew recently finished writing and teaching a performance residency with Leeds Young Authors in Leeds, England, during which he created a workshop entitled New Voices, a program leading workshops in 5 schools in England, as well as coaching their Brave New Voices team in August 2013. Leadership 500, help me welcome to the stage Mr. Matthew Cuban Hernandez.
Good morning. If you're feeling good, say yeah. If you're feeling really good and you don't care who knows about it, say heck yeah. When I say spoken, y'all say words. Spoken. Spoken. When I say poetry's good, y'all say all the time. Poetry's good? And all the time? Oh, everybody going to church. Okay, all right. Just had to make sure. Man, that made me sound really cool, man. Thank you. So my name is Matthew Cuban Hernandez. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. Whoop-de-whoop. We're the home of all things ratchet. But I live in Los Angeles right now. I've been living in LA for the past couple years, and I just flew in from LA this morning. So it's really, really awesome, and it's an amazing opportunity and privilege to be able to speak in front of you guys this morning. I work in juvenile detention centers throughout Los Angeles. Everywhere I work in the camps, it's nothing but black and brown boys, people of color. Majority of the time, they're there for charges that are nonviolent, usually getting refiled for things that normal people get a slap on the wrist for. The juvenile justice system is a flawed program with a very high recidivism rate. In the program that I work in, we teach poetry, and it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for me able to speak to young people and to people of color just about understanding their real inside goals and what is beautiful about them. I always say what we see changes who we are, and most of the youth that I'm working with, and studies have shown that a majority of urban youth are twice as likely to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder over a soldier returning home from war. So the young men that I work with are definitely fighting a war daily. And the best opportunities and the best things that I could do for them is give them a chance to speak. So I am an advocate of speaking your truth. I am an advocate of being honest. I am an advocate of being as powerful and as beautiful as you could possibly be. And I'm happy to be here this morning to spit with you guys. If you're feeling good, say yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. So this poem is dedicated to my students. It's dedicated to anyone who feels like there is a time limit on when you can achieve your greatness. There is no time limit on when you can achieve it. I once felt that if I wasn't Drake by the time I was 22 on 22s with 22 million in the bank, I was just going to be terrible. But that's absolutely not true. So this is dedicated to my students. At the Santa Fe Juvenile Detention Program, at-risk youth stab me with gazes, where tattered wires across cheeks, tattoos on the slit lines of necks, but soften after each poem. After the hour, pencils are counted and collected. Outside, a school bus unhinges its jaw for the homeless kids, the ones forbidden to attend mainstream school with no address, herded back to the teen shelter, a garage full of strollers with no one to push. The rest are lined up, march back to sky blue wall of a shark tank, back to Echo, to one pillow, one blanket, two sheets. They pass me poems on their way out like please, folded smaller than matchbooks. This is against the rules. Still I pocket them like bags of hope. Their earth-tone faces proud, with or without proper grammar. The guards thank me for the break. The coordinator assures me I got through to some, hands me a check, drives me to my next feature, and leaves. Outside, I reach for my smokes. I feel the bundle of lives against my thigh. I pull children from my pocket, unfold their hearts, and listen. One. She said I've seen more than most 15-year-olds should. She said my boyfriend is 30. We used to get intimate so he could get high. I got busted with all his drugs while he went to the liquor store. I'm starting to wonder if he ever really loved me. I'm having his baby in here. My mother said she's going to take it until I get out too. Yo, I'm a bubble from all this, y'all. Shine like lightning with it. Be hot like before I felt icicles under my eyelids when they shot my boy. Your revenge was a flower blooming in my skull. Hey, Mr. Cuban, is this what you meant by a metaphor? I want us to go back and tell them, you are at-risk youth. You are at risk of shedding every statistic. At risk of using hope to scrub your blood clean as judges' quarters. You are at risk of emptying clips of creation until cinder blocks let in more lights, until prisons shrink smaller than folded poems. You are at risk of forgiving your parents for failing best they could, for the worst day of your life, skipping until you got here. I want to tell you, one day, no one will be able to pry the pencil from your hand. I want to tell you, I didn't write my first real poem until I was 25. I want to tell you, Malcolm X was in prison until he was 27. Gandhi didn't gather legs for protest until he was 46. Mandela reached into 30 years of prison and emerged with the presidency. You risks, you poems, you keys enduring turn and grind, miracles locked in darkness until keys unlock the locks. Nobody knows who you are yet, but they will. I spent so long listening to elitists, bowing to enjambment and diction. So long I failed to notice that I have been reading all the wrong poems, but at the Challenger Youth Memorial Detention Center, a juvenile prison named after a space shuttle that exploded, a failed mission, there is a dog pound at the front gates. You can hear whining and barking as your tires roll through gravel. In the yard, you can see the lights from the state penitentiary directly behind. Most of my boys joke and say that this will be their next step, but in my class, I show them poems. Always my favorites and always the powerful. I tell them there is a future in words. I show them my past, the dirt I crawled through, the voice I stumbled on, the same voice they can find searching for the right conversations. We talk of memories, acknowledge and agree that we are the sum of what we recall. Their growth is my process, and I love to watch them blossom. Each poem, a petal forcing its way from a bud, a little more assured each time, each step, a little more confident than the last. I tell them they're worth so much more than 1,000 words, that they're an ocean of confessions begging for an out. There is a key in your every syllable. The right combinations can unlock dreams. I tell them to dream, then edit. I tell them a rough draft is one of the rare times in life you actually get a do-over. I tell them to wrap themselves in their stories. Don't get wrapped up in money, because then you'll become a hater, and haters get halitosis. I tell them, I don't know why, but it feels true. I tell them to feel for their truth like a switch when engulfed in all life's dark. I tell them this universe loves honesty, so don't hold your tongue or your punches. Their process is my growth, and the only time I don't feel guilty prostituting my emotions for strangers, I tell them everything someone told me once. You can be great. Each poem, a petal forcing its way from a bud, a little more assured each time, each step, a little more confident than the last. I tell them I love them, because most of the time they never hear that. I tell them no matter what society tells them, no matter what their POs tell them, that they are not a failed mission to me. Thank you.
Let's give him another round of applause. Talent expresses itself in so many ways, and we are excited to have that opportunity for young people in those institutions and in those systems to have that outlet to express their voice. This is the part of the program that I am most excited about. The NAACP and National Board of Directors in February of this year adopted youth and young adult engagement as the association's 6th priority game changer area. What does that really mean? We know for 80 years the NAACP has had our youth and college division, which has produced tens of thousands of young people across the country who have the training and skills necessary to go in their communities and make impact and to make lasting change. That also means that we've got to do something when those young people age out of youth and college and they hit that 25 age range, and now I'm focused on my career, focused on everything else, family, getting married, getting a boo, stacking paper. We're focused on all of that. And we return to the association when we're 50 and we go, phew, I'm established, I'm ready to work. All right? One of the things we've seen in this country, what really ignited it was the killing of Trayvon Martin and the acquittal of George Zimmerman. We saw young people across this country galvanizing in ways that we hadn't seen in decades. Then we fast forward to August 9th, 2014. It's a Saturday. Most of us are sitting on our couches, or at least I was. Sitting on our couches, and I'm scrolling through Twitter, and my timeline is filled with images of an unarmed young black boy laying face down in the street, Ferguson, Missouri. And the country exploded. Young people got up, took the mantle of this work, and decided that they were going to make change in their communities. They shut down Ferguson. They shut down as many Walmarts, Mark, as they could find. They shut down bridges. They took over police stations. But the work still must go on. Cameras are gone. We saw it in Baltimore. The cameras are gone. The talking heads have now returned to the cave from which they emerged, and we have this body of work that still needs to be done. And so this morning's conversation really focuses on highlighting a few young people that we know are doing the work, some inside the NAACP, some trained by the NAACP, and some who I've already told they have to rejoin the NAACP before they leave today. But the goal, nonetheless, is to talk about not only the work that they're doing, but the work that must be done, and more importantly, what all of the young people in the audience can do as a result. So do me a favor. If you're under the age of 35, stand up for me. Including the lovely, fabulous Watkins. But all of you in the audience under the age of 35 are exactly who we're talking about. You're exactly the folks that we're looking for and waiting on. Let's give them a round of applause. So to kick off this morning's conversation, I want to bring up the phenomenal panelists, many of them who I have the opportunity to not only call a colleague, but a friend. One of them, we go all the way back to the freshman year of college on the beautiful campus of North Carolina A&T, and it's amazing what God has done in our lives since then. Join me in welcoming first to the stage Mr. Keith Benjamin. Keith serves as the Street Scale Campaign Manager for Safe Routes to Schools National Partnerships. Keith, come on up and join us. I'm gonna call next to the stage the Senior Campaigner for Gun Violence for Amnesty International USA, Ms. Jamira Burley. Our youngest participant today, but nonetheless powerful, Ms. Ashley Serpa, who's a part of our East Boston High School Youth Council in Boston, Massachusetts. Next young man is born and bred NAACP, and if you haven't had an opportunity to hear him give a keynote, you have missed a treat indeed. Welcome to the stage, Mr. Brendan Mitchell, who's the president of our Florida Youth and College Division, and a member of our NAACP National Board of Directors. And lastly, a friend of mine all the way back to our freshman days of college, Ms. Shay Harris. She is the school's partnership managers for College Summit. Let's give Shay a round of applause as well. So we want to open this morning's conversation really allowing all of you to share with us for a moment a bit about yourself and about the work that you do. So Shay, we'll start with you. Give us a bit about yourself. Tell us about what you're doing at College Summit and what's coming down the pipe for you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Again, my name is Shay Harris, and I'm actually now formally a school partnership manager of College Summit. I actually just Tuesday will be starting with the DC government agency, the Office of Returning Citizen Affairs, as their deputy director. And so I'll be working with formerly incarcerated, thank you. I'm excited, thank you. I'll be working with formerly incarcerated people and their families as they return home and helping them access services. And so previously, after graduating from North Carolina A&T State with Sammy, I've been in the nonprofit sector, and I've been working primarily with young people in terms of workforce development, advocacy, and I'm really excited to be here. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Brendan?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, Lord. Good morning.
Good morning.
Like Sammy said, my name is Brendan Mitchell. I'm actually a student at Howard University in the District of Columbia. Rising senior, one more year. Thank the Lord. But as Sammy said, I serve as the president for the Florida State Conference NAACP Youth and College Division, and also serve as the Region 5 Youth and College Division member of the National Board of Directors for the NAACP. Have been state president for going on 5 years now, and so some of the work that I've done in the past, particularly 2012 civic engagement work. Florida, we registered over 100,000 voters in the 2012 election season. And then we're also doing a lot of work around the juvenile justice work. I'm a resident of Ocala, Florida, which is about an hour north of here. And Sanford, Florida is in my back door, just a ride through the forest. And so the Trayvon Martin case particularly hit me hard. I was 17 at the time. I was in high school, and it could have been me. And that's been the phrase I think we've been hearing a lot. And so that was probably my most valued time in this work, because I had a moment where I had a empathetic and not sympathetic. I didn't feel sorry for it, but I felt it. And so that's been my driving force ever since.
Tell us a bit about the leadership roles you hold at Howard.
I was recently elected as the president for the Howard University Student Association. So thank you. Representing 11,000 undergraduate, graduate, and professional students at the nation's Mecca and most politically engaged and active campus
Lord.
you could be on. I'll stop there.
Ashley, tell us a bit about yourself and the work you're doing in your high school chapter.
Well, my name is Ashley Surface. I go to East Boston High School. This is my second year in NAACP. And as of this year, we finally have created a trauma class that we're trying to do in public schools, where students who are our age are able to engage with adults and speak about how they feel. As well as if they're not only like speak, but like engage into like a relationship with adults where they can talk about the trauma they've gone through and how they can go to a brighter path where they're able to, how can I put it? How they're able to express themselves, but not feel free, feel able, like, have a vivid mind and be able to feel accepted as a family. We're trying to make it a class where they can just be open and say whatever they feel, and they form a family with them.
It's awesome, awesome. Thank you, thank you. So Jameer, you have an interesting story as to how you got engaged in this work. Do you mind sharing a bit of that with us?
I guess. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Jameer Burley, and I am the senior campaigner for gun violence and criminal justice at Amnesty International USA. And prior to joining Amnesty, I was the ED for the Philadelphia Youth Commission in the mayor's office. And I got involved in this work through a very personal experience, and I think many of us do. I grew up in a family with 16 brothers and sisters, where by the time I was 15 years old, all 10 of my brothers had been incarcerated for either violent or nonviolent crimes. So when I think about criminal justice and the people who are mostly impacted, it's people who look like us and people who are from our families. I think the aha moment for me came in 2005. It was the year that both my father was convicted of murder and the year that my brother Andre was shot and killed in Philadelphia. So the work is extremely important to me, and so working at Amnesty, it allows me the opportunity to look at everything from a human rights lens and ways in which we can hold our government accountable for human rights violations and making sure that everyone is safe in their communities, in their schools, and walking down the street. So I'm super excited to be here and be a part of this family, and I'm looking forward to us creating some solutions for change.
Awesome, thank you, man, thank you. Lastly, Keith, I know you wear a number of hats in both your professional and personal capacities. You want to tell us a bit about that?
So, good morning, everyone. Keith Benjamin, Street Scale Campaign Manager with Safe Routes to School National Partnership. I'm currently working in 8 states and about 40 cities around how we're making sure in underserved communities, placemaking values are seen as a solutionary point to many of the issues that we face on a daily basis. You were mentioning Ferguson, and Sammy and I happen to be there at the same time for different reasons, but the same cause. And I didn't know until he texted me, and we were with 50 people, and they were about to march on West Florence. I'm about to run up West Florence, and I accidentally run into a grandmother and a 3-year-old right in front of the McDonald's everybody saw. And this 3-year-old looks at me and looks at his grandmother, sees the police officer in the car and one sitting on the hood, and he points at them and asks us, are they gonna kill me? And, you know, as an older black male, I'm like, you know, you good, little man, you're gonna be okay. But the fact that he was conscious of that, the fact that he didn't feel ownership of his space, empowerment within his community, and already saw himself as disposable in 2014 was problematic. And a lot of those things has to do with who does and doesn't have control of our community space and what does and doesn't happen there and the accessibility that we do and don't have, right? So that's the work that I do, really trying to bridge the gap between a lot of the ways in which we talk about community and what it should look like and the spaces that we're not occupying that can be solutionary points to that.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you all. Thank you all. So the recent uprisings in Baltimore, I was having a conversation with a colleague, and he goes, you know, the Baltimore uprising is extremely important to everyone in Baltimore right now. But the unfortunate reality is situations of that nature happen every day in communities across this country. We know that it's been happening for a number of years, decades even, but it seems with the emergence of technology and with these high-def video cameras on our cell phones, we're capturing these incidents in real time, and they're going viral. So I guess my first question to the panel, and we'll start with anyone who'd like to answer it, do you think we're seeing an uptick in this behavior, or do you think we're just now becoming more conscious of what's been happening for a number of years?
James Baldwin once said, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be at rage all the time. And since Trayvon, I think since 2005, I'm a lot more conscious of what's going on, but I do think the role that's happening now, both in Baltimore and Ferguson, is due to the fact that people have access to technology. And I think it's harder for people to visualize someone being killed in another community if they don't see it themselves. Okay. And so I think the emergence of technology allows people to, unfortunately, to be there and to feel it, but it's something that's been happening for decades to people that look like us. And I think the question is, not how we do action when there's cameras involved, but how do we do actions when there are not cameras involved and people don't have the technology available to protect themselves.
Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I think one thing that it does do is it's given us more power to dictate narrative, or at least fight against the narrative that's put out there before it comes, right?
Okay.
And we know that process that happened. So after Trayvon with Mike Brown, as soon as they started trying to trash his name and try to find something to figure out to make him look as the bad guy, we knew that was coming. And not to say that all the solutions came out of that to fix it, but it gives us that space to be able to, on our own, be able to create our own narrative as to what we're seeing and what exactly that looks like, be able to give voice to those that need it. I'm reminded of the young man who was in the car with Freddie Gray on the way there. And they put out that, whoever was in the car said that he got injured, and he came out in his own way and just made it clear that this is the actual story, this is what makes sense. And that was able to circumvent whatever was being put out. So that opportunity to at least have a larger say in the narrative, I think, plays into it.
Okay, so you talk about redefining the narrative. Brendan, I want to talk to you for a second. You do keynote speeches and things of that nature. In what ways do you see young people beginning to tell their own story or their own narrative? And what do you think is contributing to young people really, I guess you could say, grabbing the mic in a new way?
I think what Jamira said kind of hit it on the head. In this sector of nonviolent civil disobedience, social justice, we hear the same terms, and we kind of all have a communal understanding of why people are talking more. I think I've just recently learned how twisted narratives can become when because I live in DC, went over to Baltimore and had a chance to meet with members of the Black Guerrilla family and the Crips and the Bloods. And before I went into those meetings with them, I was still under the impression that they had put out a hit on police and said a life for a life. I was under the impression that they were the ones who burned down the CVS because that was what the news portrayed. And I walked in the room and found out the exact opposite, that they weren't even the ones who looted the Madame Mall. They weren't the ones they didn't put out a hit on police officers, a life for a life. They weren't burning down CVS, they were protecting Black businesses from getting looted and burned down in the midst of that riot. And so what I think is amazing about this technological era that we're in is that just like they had that conversation with me, they're putting that information on social media, and they're telling the truth, and they're coming out and saying, yes, I'm a member of this street organization. And yes, this is my family, but this is not who we are, this is not what we do, and we want to be a part of the change just as much as the rest of the nation wants to be a part of the change, but this is our community. And I think that translates to the national dialogue, that the way we are portrayed by the Fox Newses and many others is not the actual situations happening in our community. And I think technology is finally giving us that fight back to say, no, this is not who we are. This is not what we are about, but this is the change that we want to see. And that's what I'm loving about this movement. But like Jamira said, we got to do it off camera too. We have to be a part of these conversations and explaining and building our power when we're off camera and when we're not getting seen, because unfortunately in Oklahoma, we don't hear anything else about what happened in Oklahoma.
Right.
We don't hear anything else about what happened in South Carolina. We don't hear anything else about what's happening in the other 49 states in this country, because everyone is looking at Baltimore.
Right.
And it's becoming like a path. It's like a fad. And so we have to build power around the entire country and what's happening.
And it's interesting that you say that. When we talk about this notion of street organizations, and one of the things that I know that Ashley and the East Boston folks are looking at is this notion of trauma, but we know that that trauma doesn't just come from police killings, right? We know that right now that seems to be the flavor of the month, but 2 years ago we were picketing and we were rioting. We were talking about this notion around gun violence. We had to address gun violence. So I guess my question is kind of twofold. Number one, are these issues connected in you all's mind? And number two, how do we kind of move away from, particularly our generation with the emergence of social media, how do we move away from this flavor of the month mentality? Shay, we'll start with you.
Well, I will say there's definitely connections, right? Gun control needs to happen on all levels for people wearing badges as well as in our communities. But the thing that I think upsets me so much when we want to talk black on black crime and when we're having the conversation about police brutality and everyone wants to say, but what about the black on black crime? Is it an issue? Absolutely. But if we're going to talk about it, then let's also talk about the root causes. Let's talk about systematic poverty. Let's talk about broken education systems. Let's talk about our cradle to prison pipeline. Thank you. So until we're ready to have real conversations, I'm willing to talk about black on black crime. Is it an issue? Absolutely. Do we need to hold ourselves accountable? Absolutely. But we also need to get back to a sense of community. And at the root of it, I believe it all boils down to love. We don't have enough love in our communities. So that's my 2 cents. So yes, I definitely think that there are connections and that we have to address both on various levels. But we have to be real in our conversation, and we have to change the narrative, as Keith alluded to, and not let people pigeonhole us into saying, well, what about all this black on black violence? When we really look at statistics, it's no worse than white communities. White people kill each other as well. So that's the conversation that I would like to have.
Interesting. So Ashley, specifically with the course that you all are working on, that you've piloted in your school, that you're looking to get across the district, like how are you all talking about this notion of violence in communities and the impact that it has on communities of color?
So I feel that segregation is something that 50 years ago was put aside after Martin Luther King. It was kind of like the topic that, oh, there isn't much segregation anymore. But then with all these cases going viral because of technology, it's giving us like a wake-up call that there's still segregation, there's still racism, there's still things that like people of color feel threatened by police, as well as police feel threatened because of the people of color. I feel like by there being gun violence and then police being part of killing some of the people, I feel like it's because they feel like they're in danger because of the approach that they had towards the person. And the person also feels threatened by getting approached by the police and feels that he should throw an aggressive response towards. So they feel insecure about how they should approach each other, so they treat it in an aggressive way.
Wow, that's a huge point, and I think you segue us perfectly into, there's been a lot of conversation around the criminalization of Black lives. Like, we are, the NAACP released a racial profiling report some time ago entitled Born Suspect, and it talks about the fact that Black folks in this country, you are a suspect at birth. You are suspicious just by the very fact that you were born. So anybody want to talk a bit about like the criminalization of Black lives, what's happening there, but more importantly, how young people combat that?
If I could wrap in one of your earlier questions with that in terms of where are we finding our solutionary points, I think it's an imperative that we not pigeonhole ourselves into just thinking that the gun violence and police profiling issue is just in the the solutions are just from a criminal justice perspective, right?
Okay.
I'm in transportation and community development, right? And if you look at percentages of citations of where police are doing specific work, so if you take the Tampa example, if you take the Fort Lauderdale example, Fort Lauderdale, 86% of the citations that were attributed to Black and brown men for walking citations were in Black and brown communities. And there's literally a line you can see of where the citations are happening and where they're not happening, right? If you take in New York City, NYU just came out with a report and showed that 13 of the 14 precincts in the area where Eric Garner was stopped, Black and brown were stopped 80% of the time more so than their white counterparts, right? In Detroit, if you're between the age of 12 and 17, you have to have a letter that says that you're allowed to ride your bike in the street.
Wow.
So who determines who does have a letter and who doesn't, right? So it's not just stuff that's kind of like out of the blue. It's systematically and by our laws and its placemaking values as to who has control of our space and who doesn't, right? And if we're not occupying other solutionary points besides, and I have no hate on it, I'm just saying that there's other ways we could be talking about this conversation, resources, coalition building, different things like that that can play into that need to address those specific concerns. I'll give one more example. In Baltimore, in 1944, the primary urban planner for that city said that to rid ourselves of low-income and Black and brown people will make us better. So from 1951 to 1971, 90% of the individuals who were displaced were Black. Right, so when we're talking about issues around access, issue around health, issue around what psychologically and mentalities that people have because of like food, whatever those things are, a lot of those things have to do with who made determinations of where people could live, what they could access and what they couldn't access. And if we don't make sure that we're in places to address those solutions at all different points, then we're gonna miss the mark, right? It's just important that we think in a holistic way about where these solutions can come from.
Right. I appreciate that. So one of the elephants in the room when we talk about the role of millennials in the movement, we're here to pick up on your comments yesterday, in the movement. There is this reemergence of the generational divide. We know it's not new. It existed in the civil rights movement, but it's important that we talk about it, and we talk about it in constructive ways. I think, unfortunately, a few civil rights leaders in our communities have become the face of this divide, though we know it runs much deeper than that individual and even that one particular organization. So talk to me for a second on your thoughts on the generational divide. Number one, is there a divide? You know, there are some folks who say there isn't. Is there a divide? If you feel that there is, why is there the divide? Let's start there. Is there a divide, and if so, why?
Okay.
Okay.
Everybody wakes up.
This is the elephant.
The big one.
The big one, the really big one. I heard Jeff Johnson say about a year ago, and it stuck with me ever since, and I've said it before in a few NAACP conversations. Jeff Johnson said one of the biggest issues we have internally in our movement is that we have too many old people and not enough elders.
Unpack that.
And so, no shade, but what shade? But I think it does stick because The description he gave of an old person is someone who, you know, had their heyday in the movement, you know, was involved when they were our age. But in aging and in, you know, being a product of the changes that happened, Brown v. Board, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and then having that door of opportunity somewhat fling open, they had an opportunity to grow. And so when these movements resurface or, you know, never really went anywhere, the old person says that the young people need to do it this way, like we did it, how we did it. Not recognizing that times have changed. They couldn't tweet in 1965 that we're marching on Washington, or 1964 that we're marching on Washington. They couldn't do those things. It was 1963, I'm getting my years mixed up. But so today it's different. But an elder is that same person who was involved, who was about it, but was that youth in the room that recognized that they didn't want their voice muddled and they're not gonna do the same to the youth today. And so we need more elders because sadly, the faces that are causing this divide, which is existent, are the old people. But the elders are the ones in the communities and in the localities and in your certain areas saying, you can still do it, remain strong. I was there, this is how we did it, but I know you gotta do it a little bit differently because your time is different. And I think that's the issue, and to be honest, that's the solution. We need more elders.
Strong point, strong point. Jameer, I know you were chomping at the bit for that.
Just to add on to that, I mean, because my last job, I was working with young people in spaces and places where the old people thought they knew all the answers. And so one of my concerns, and I think one of the things that caused the divide, is this idea that I'm the old person in the room, so clearly I know everything. And you have to learn, and you have to listen to what I have to say, not recognizing that each of us have something to learn from each other, and we can both provide something sustainable to the conversation. But one of my also biggest concerns is that too often we have people who are so invested in the movement that they themselves have not been able to separate their personal brand from the work that needs to be done. And so what happens is that they don't want to compromise whatever it is that they're getting in the positions that they're in, from allowing young people who have the ideas, who have the spirit, who have the energy to really do the work in those spaces. And so we're really thinking about sustainable development and long-term longevity. We have to create spaces for young people to not only get the knowledge, the skills, but also the platform to really be the experts of their own experience and be the ones who are speaking that change into existence.
So when we hear that, though, do we give some credence or some validity to the fact that young people, there is this, I'm not going to say paying dues because I hate that notion, but there is some level of we've got to sit and learn for a bit. Like, this isn't just, protesting and shutting it down, but there's a sustainable body of work that has to happen. So how do we balance the conversation around giving young people platforms with also making sure we've prepared that generation for that body of work?
How come that can't happen at the same time?
I'm not saying it is. I just want to hear. I want to hear your thoughts.
So in Baltimore, my man Rashad, he works for Revolt TV, calls me up like a month ago. He said, "Look, man, I want to do something in Baltimore. There's a lot of stuff going on. Can we raise like five grand in 48 hours?" We ended up raising 20. Called a couple folk, called you up, let you know that we were going to be there. But we wanted to just go ahead and do it. We didn't want to go through red tape. We knew we wanted to buy food. They needed medical supplies in Gilmore Homes. We were just going to go out and make it happen. It wasn't no like, let's have a meeting, let's check with the board, let's make sure that our sponsors are okay with this, whatever. It's like, let's make it happen. And in 48 hours, we had 20 grand from literally around the world. Went out there for like 3 days and then worked with Baltimore United, which is all young people. Be More Block, which is all young people. And we just made it do what it do. I don't know. I mean, of course, there were some of the folk who were with us who may not have the training, may have not had the background, may have not known the different things to make sure that are in place. But I think that the opportunity is there to work, and there's folk that want to do that work. Let them do that work, and then come behind them, lift them up, rub their shoulders, guide them towards this way, and make sure they're good. Like, I don't want to, like, I'm 27. You did this at 27. Like, you did the same exact thing. Like, and Miss Sweetlove, we were in Birmingham, and we had that conversation. You know, that has to happen. Like, I don't understand why it has to be the young blood. You good? Sit over there and learn something. And I'm like, well, I would like to learn through some action. And I've seen you doing it. Let me do it as well. Right. Yeah.
But also is the notion that these young people, like, you're not the generation that raised us. Like, we are not a reflection of what you put into us or didn't put into us. And so now at 27, when it's time for you to move aside, you saying that now it's time for us to learn. You should have been doing that this entire process. And so I think, and it's the notion that young people haven't been in this work. I mean, I've been in it since I was 15. I know you've been in it for a minute. Like, we've been doing this work in back rooms and places that have been cutting deals for years. And so I think like, just because you now see new faces in front of the camera doesn't mean young people are now coming out the woodwork and trying to do the work.
And one more point, you don't want to miss out, man, because a lot of us are very well, like a lot of young people who are making their moves around the country are very well connected. Like, we're all talking, we're coordinated, we're having, you know, like, I was just sitting with Ra, and she talking about all a whole cohort who's going to Paris and doing some stuff that's happening in Paris with young folk. Like, stuff is happening. Yeah. And y'all gonna be missing out. I mean, just say, like, let's make it work.
And not to drag it on, but I think, like, he hit it on the head. Like, Jamira trained me in some organizing strategy 2 years ago. Like,
through a fellowship, right?
Through a fellowship, through PFAL. So, I mean, I think it's so crazy when you look historically. It's almost like we're told that we can't go through trial and error in trying to develop solutions for our communities, as if there was not trial and error in the movement in the 50s and 60s, as if Bloody Sunday never happened and they just marched over Edmund Pettus without any problem and without any issue. I think we have to be accountable and say, you know I might not get it right this time, but it's gonna happen because I have that drive to make it happen. And it's just that simple.
So there is a key demographic that, in my estimation, I see as being left out of this movement of young folks. Shay, specifically around the work that you do, we've not really given a lot of conversation or really voiced the need to make sure that young folks who are returning from stints of incarceration also have a place, also have the opportunity. Let's just be real. It's not just for the young folks of color who've gone to school, who've always done the right things, who have the degrees. You know what I mean? Like, we have to get away from this talented 10th notion. But how do we give affirmation to young folks of color coming back from stints of incarceration to say you are just as valuable to this work?
Sure. Again, I'll start with the main word, and that's love. I think we often forget that, you know, had we not had a second chance, whether it be in a relationship, whether it be, you know, various different situations, our lives might have looked a lot different. I know, had I not had the opportunity to go to North Carolina A&T and leave Columbus, Ohio, my trajectory would be completely different. And so that being said, I think when we address it from love and that lens, and knowing that, you know, had I made this turn and not done this, or had I not been interceded, that my life might look a lot different, then we wouldn't be so judgmental. And so that's the first step. And then we've kind of talked about it. We've got to get into policy spaces. We've got to change laws. There's a lot of laws on the book that are simply unjust and that has systematically been designed to perpetuate people into poverty, systemic poverty. I'm working, when I start on Tuesday, there's over 60,000 people in Washington, D.C. that have a felony conviction. And so when you think about opportunities and access, and luckily in D.C. you can still vote while incarcerated, and, well, once you come home, rather, I should say. You know, some states don't even have that opportunity. So if you can't vote, now you can't be on a jury, you're essentially a new slave. And so when we talk about the new Jim Crow and all of those things, they're all intertwined. And so when we think about solutions, again, I think it starts in love. I think it starts also with policy and really understanding, you know, the laws that are on the books and how we have to, you know, vote. We haven't talked about voting yet, but that's real, especially in DC, where, you know, you don't lose your right to vote. in DC, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar, but DC doesn't have a state. We're not a state, right? So we don't have a state facility. So when you're incarcerated in DC, you're shipped all over the country. So we have people from all over, as far as there's people in institutions here in Florida. There's people as far as California. So you have no access to your family. You have little resources. In prisons now, you can no longer get a degree. In a lot of places, you're supposed to have access to getting your GED, but that's not happening in a lot of places. So we have to really look at the resources and, within our facilities. Reentry starts before you come home. I'm just going to say it, right, because we're having real talk. Black people have to stop being reactionary to everything, and that also deals with reentry. You can't expect a person that's been incarcerated for 10, 15 years, even 2 years, to come back and have the answers. And so if you're not having any training, or the training that you're getting, it's no real jobs when you come home. Now you have a felony conviction, so you can't get a job. And I'll land on this, because I'm sure other people will have other things to add. I think a pivotal piece of legislation is banning the box. And for those who may not know about Thank you. For those who may not know about banning the box, we were able to do it in DC. It took several years and a lot of coalition building, as Keith talked about. But now when people apply for jobs, they no longer on the application have to check whether they've been convicted of a felony, misdemeanor, et cetera. And so that at least opens the door. At least now, when you fill out the application, if you are a qualified candidate, you can at least get an interview. Now, we have another conversation for talking about, once you get the offer, the background check, et cetera, and what all that means. But I think that in itself is a key legislation that has happened in about, I don't want to misquote, but at least I know 12 states. That is really pivotal. So I think that's a good place to start.
So there are a number of issues that we've talked about, and quite honestly, we could be here all day running through issues, right? We have no shortage of issues. But actually, I want to come to you for a second. What are your thoughts on, I'm a young person, I'm in my community, I'm hearing about all these issues, I have no clue where to go or what to do, how to get started. How do you think young people can even get started in doing this work?
I agree that love is one of the things that we need. I mean, young people, as they are growing up, they deal with what the generations have caused, the generations before have caused. See, segregation, they deal with that, and then as they go on, they develop anger, and then while they're in, okay, let's say they go into juvenile detention, right? And then when they get out, they're still angry about it. They still feel the same way. I mean, I don't feel like it's a solution to their actions. It's not enough. They still don't learn, and they still don't get the moral of their actions. See, if they I feel like young people our age, we get influenced very quickly because of the lack of knowledge we have. And as they said, that elders don't always have all the knowledge, we also have a voice, but from a different perspective as the generations before. So I feel that as if the young people should have some type of therapy or a mental, a way to mentally express their feelings so that they know how to handle the trauma and don't express their anger in an aggressive way.
That's huge. That's a huge understanding the mental health aspect of that. That's huge. So what are other folks' thoughts on how young people get engaged? I mean, we got an audience full of young people who we're going to open it up for questions in a second, but how do you think folks even get started? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? What do I do? What's my entry point into this work?
As the second youngest person on the panel.
Trying to call us old?
No, I'm not calling y'all old. No ageism up here. I got started because of my mother. But
Where's Brenda's mom? Wave, mama. Is she back there? Hey, mama.
But to be quite honest, I think that wasn't necessarily my true start, because I felt that I was doing something because it was kind of like my mom pushing me to do something, and it's definitely yielded great results. Mother knows best. But my true start was actually when I was 13, and my family went through a crisis. We lost my grandmother in a certain amount of time, and then my dad worked for a factory that built automotive parts, and his factory did a huge layoff. They didn't give any severance to any of their employees, and I was due to have a critical surgery the next day, and our insurance was cut the day he was laid off. And so that was like my aha moment. And I was like, oh, this is really messed up. And so I think when we talk about like getting young people involved, I think if you are a person of color, man or woman, 15, 10, 7, 5, in this country, you've had a few aha moments. And I think when you get in spaces that can kind of help you realize that that aha moment is a product of some systematic issues, it gives you the opportunity and the ability to have some outcry and to do some work. Because had I not been at NAACP, I would have never known that my dad being laid off without any severance was an economic injustice. Like I would never have known that. And so I think whatever organization you become a part of, or whatever way you decide to affiliate yourself or get involved in this movement, it takes that aha moment, like, Jameer told her story. It takes those moments for you to realize, like, dang, it's real out here. I never thought it would happen to me, But when it does, you just have to respond. And I think that's how we get young people involved. That's how any person gets involved in this work.
Any other thoughts on that before we open the floor?
I'll just add that, thank God for the internet. We have the world at our fingertips, and so take advantage of it. It's not hard to just sit there. One of my aha moments was working with the NAACP Washington Bureau when I was still in college, and we knew that we had to do an executive summary report, and I knew I had an interest in criminal justice reform, and I just was on the internet like, okay, what am I gonna write my paper about? And stumbled across mandatory minimum sentencing. And that project literally changed my life, because when I started to really read and understand all of these laws and the war on drugs and how all of these systems were set up to oppress people of color, it was mind-blowing to me. And so while, I grew up in the Urban League, I grew up in the NAACP, again, it was like my mom saying, no, you're gonna go do something, right? And keeping me out of trouble. But that experience, then going to Gina, Louisiana while I was still in college, and grappling with the Gina 6 situation, and as it continued, I would say, research. While you're sitting there, you have smartphones, use them. And then also, we really just gotta demystify a lot of the influences, as you said, that are occurring. There's reasons why what we're viewing on media is occurring, right? And so when we talk about changing the narrative, when we really start to read a book, like people, young people, we've got to read, we've got to get back to the essentials and understanding that it's so much power and knowledge and really not taking it for granted.
One other thing, since you said keeping it all the way 100, is success can't be selfish. And I think for a lot of us who have made it, we perpetuate our making it as enough for the movement. Like, and that's you know, do you know what I had to get through to get right here? So that's enough for it. So there's no obligation for give back. There's no obligation to community. There's no obligation in seeing how, as an engineer, as a pastor, as a urban planner, as an ED, as an elected official, how your position can play into the larger scheme of the work, of the mentoring, of the taking the time, of the going back kind of thing. So I think that call out has to be the case. And, you know, with us being in DC, you know, that's pervasive. You know? So I think that's something where we need to, that needs to be part of our obligation. That needs to be part of our obligation.
Awesome. So we have a few more minutes before we are to wrap up the session. I want to open the floor for folks in the audience who may have questions of our panelists that you'd like insights on. We have 2 mics here in the center aisle, so feel free. Any questions? Yes, ma'am. Come on up.
It's quiet in here, man. Oh, thank you.
Come on, lights.
Right? Shout out to the crew with the lights.
Excuse me. Good morning to you all, and thank you so much for all of your insight. My name is Crystal. I run an online magazine, and you know, I think my experience with the movement has evolved over time. You know, I was kind of in the policy bubble in D.C. and recently moved back to North Carolina with my toddler and my husband, and I'm on the board of the Charlotte NAACP. And one of the things that occurs to me as a challenge, kind of being a young person in this space and wanting to bridge that divide, right? Wanting to build greater coalitions is 2-part. On one hand, I think for those people who've quote unquote made it, right, where it's like, is my success enough, or how do I give back to the movement? There can be some distrust in the community where, like, if you have a certain image, people are like, oh, well, you're corporate, or you're to this, you're to that. You don't understand my struggle. You can't help me. You can't reach out. But if somebody has the resources to help you and the wherewithal to help you, how have you started to, or what kind of strategies have you used to kind of connect those dots for people to understand that, hey, your greatest ally may be someone who looks nothing like you, who you know, who didn't grow up like you. And then the other part of that is when you talk about policy solutions, right? Because our issues are systemic. They are programmed into the fabric of America. But policy is a long, dirty, dastardly battle. You know, it's not, there's no quick fix, right? You know, it's ongoing. So how do you employ tactics that keep people encouraged, you know, when they're dealing with short-term realities, but what they need is a long-term solution?
I think there's, I don't know, I think about it in simple terms, right? So on the thing with having made it and how do you get back to those communities, like I can't, when we were in Ferguson, I couldn't walk in there and be like, you know, I've worked with Obama, I did this or that. I was standing with Crips and Bloods. They were like, why are you here and what you trying to do? Mm-hmm. Like there's nothing about where I come from, my resume or anything like that that would have legitimized me in those streets. It's just not. It's just, it was, what are you coming here to do and how are you playing a part in the solution? So I think, you know, approach is key. And then in terms of legislatively and policy-wise, and I'll let somebody else talk about that too, but again, some of those solutions are in other spaces. Right? We need to get the Racial Profiling Act handled, right? We need to get things done with the gun laws. But I was just in Houston with a whole coalition of folk that included the health director for the NAACP for that particular area, where we're working on taking control of the streets, literally in terms of how they're built and how that community is built in the 3rd Ward. Outlined a particular area, realized that the local Metropolitan Planning Organization has $10 million in the livability grants that we could be accessing, brought those folk to the table and decided this is how we want the community to look. How are we going to make sure that the folk who have been living here stay here and are able to live here in a healthy, more accessible way? That's policy too, and that's a solution in the work, right? But it's not necessarily something that's immediately seen as a space to occupy. So I think it's just thinking more broadly about when we're talking policy, when we're talking about opportunities and resources to take advantage of, really doing a broad stroke.
And I think to her point too, how do we, so for those, those long-term pieces, we've been talking about the fix to the Voting Rights Act for a minute. We now got in racial profiling, that we have to create political momentum to get done. To her point, how do we keep people encouraged and engaged in the movement when it's like, I didn't sign up for this 10-year battle. How do we help folks understand that?
But so it's twofold. One, I would say, is for any person, whenever you're going into an initiative and or you're starting an initiative, is thinking, if I was to leave today, how would this work continue? And also, if we are able to, and thinking from a point of view that I'm going into this work to solve it, to get myself out of a job. Too often we go into this work and we're thinking, oh, I'm gonna get paid for the next 20, 30 years. Shout out to some of our elders. But no shade, but it's really about how do we put ourselves out of business, but also how do we create that momentum and training young people to be able to lead for generations. But also it's about putting young people in positions of power. We can't just say we want you in the room, we want to hear your great ideas, but yet they're not a part of the implementation stages, they're not a part of the reevaluation of the initiative, but we just want to hear their ideas and get it. That's not real engagement, that's not authentic engagement. And so I think we have to provide them platforms to really be a part of the conversation. And the thing I'll say about policy, or the thing I'll say about leadership is that as a young person, when you want to get involved in this work, you have to find what's authentic to you, know your story, and live in your truth. Not everyone is going to be at the front lines, and that's fine. Not everyone is going to be on MSNBC, CNN, and that's fine. But we need people to be able to donate money. We need people in those places creating policy deals. Like, we need people that share our values in places and spaces that were not meant for us. And so we have to honor those places and spaces and honor those people who are there and not call them sellouts when they can help to provide us a door and a gateway to get our work done.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you for your question.
Hey everybody. Good morning. My name is John Wosu, Georgia Southern University student and president of the National Black Graduate Student Association. Yo, I really want to say that for you all to be up there from adolescence to early adulthood, doing work, man, I just want to commend each and every one of you, especially, the 27-year-olds, specifically because I'm 27. It really is inspirational. So, I appreciate y'all. And then for you to be, are you 17?
Who? I'm 16.
You're 16.
I'll take that.
Yo, so you like just learned to drive. Like, you're doing big, like, yo, keep doing what you're doing, like, for real. Like, it's just the beginning. It's only getting started, all right? Man, I guess my concern, one of the things that was mentioned earlier was about the conversation around black on black crime and police brutality and law enforcement dealing with black individuals. And so I guess my concern is, how do we have those conversations that are really like apples and oranges? Like, apples are high in fiber, oranges are high in vitamin C. You got to have both of them in order to like live sustainably in a healthy way. So how can you like preach accountability to the people who are in darkness, but not also preach accountability to the people who are creating that darkness? And so it's frustrating to me when we have those conversations as if they're on the same level, even though there are parallels there. I'm wondering, how can we effectively change that narrative to be like, every time someone brings that up, like, well, Rush Limbaugh, what about blacks killing blacks? They've been doing it all the time, which is true. We need to have that conversation, but we also need to talk about how law enforcement is supposed to represent a government who is supposed to protect and serve individuals, not kill them, or not, over-police them. And there are a lot of different dynamics there. So I'm wondering, like, yeah, like from as a panelist, people who are here and experts in their own experience and everything that they brought to the table, like, I really would like to hear your insights on that.
Oh, knowledge is power. Ironically enough, the police are not here to protect us, and that's a Supreme Court decision.
They should be.
They should be,
right.
And their slogan is to serve and protect, but there was actually a Supreme Court decision that actually said that police are not here to serve you, they're here to enforce laws. And so if we really want the police to do what their slogan says, which is to serve and protect, then we have to change laws and policies, but it starts with first educating people. And yes, there are parallels with black on black violence, white on white violence, or police killing people. The difference with police violence is that we pay you.
Right.
out of our tax dollars. You are here to serve, not serve us, but you are here to represent and prevent crime from happening. And so that is a problem. If I'm paying you to then be my executor, that's a problem, a systematic problem. So I think one of the conversation starters needs to be is that yes, we have crime in Black communities, yes, we have crimes in white communities, in Asian communities, in Hispanic communities. When you are mostly around the people that look like you, violence tends to look like that.
Violence is segregated.
Exactly. So I think the conversation needs to be more so when we talk about police violence is police officers are paid by the taxpayers to do a job, and unfortunately their job is not to kill us. And so the first step is changing policies.
Awesome. Thank you for your question, sir.
Hi.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Vivica McBean. I'm 12, and I am a part of the Jack and Jill. And there's kids there that really don't know what the struggle is. And I'm with a MECAT, and I'm the president of the Auxiliary Phi Beta sorority, a MECAT. And they know what the struggle is, but they don't really know how to approach it. And my question is, how do I help them both to know what the struggle is, and how do they help them and kind of know what to do?
I just want to say that's Jacksonville Youth Council also. Florida in the house. But I'll let someone else answer her question.
Are you sure?
Not that I can. I mean, I think we've all been in those places where we see people who just don't realize they have privilege. Or don't understand the concept of white privilege. So to break it down, some people, or in this society, there are some people who are just born into opportunity. And particularly in Jack and Jill, you'll find more of those people than the other. But I think what's important for the people who don't understand the struggle, I think the best route is education and it's knowledge. Because 9 times out of 10, and I think one of my best experiences was in the YP4 fellowship through PFAL, because I was sitting in a room with people of color, with LGBT people, with white people who were like, I can't stand the fact that I can walk down the street and not have a problem in New York City, and a Black man 2 feet behind me is getting pushed up on a pole and frisked. And so I think it's important that we just enlighten and share our stories. As for the people who may not necessarily know how to implement or how to act on the struggle, even though they know it exists, I think it's the same answer. I think it's, you understand the issue, so let's educate and talk about solutions so we can solve the problem. But honestly, it's very true. They say each generation is more wickeder and wiser. And so we have to educate and we have to keep up and we have to learn to solve the problems, because just as much as we talking about learning, best believe the other side is learning twice as hard as we are, because they have to stay ahead. We reference 1960. Don't act like the other side isn't studying what was done in 1960. You watch the movie Selma and you see how Dr. King was strategizing in the room. Some of the best books written on the movement that give you the best details, sadly but truthfully, are written by individuals who would like to perpetuate the racism and the other isms in our communities, because they study it. And so if we don't study it, they say you got to be twice as good to get half as much. It's the same in this movement. You got to be twice as smart to get half as much in this movement. And so we have to learn. And you can do that at 12. Miss Fair, you can do that at whatever age. Like, you can learn. I've been learning. Like, you can do it.
Hashtag Beyonce. Thank you for your question, ma'am. Next question.
Hey, I'm Brianna Vinda. I'm a student at East Boston High School and part of the East Boston NAACP chapter. And I'm participating in the class that Ashley spoke of, the street trauma class. And one of the discussions we have a lot about is racism and how it affects us. And my question to y'all is, being a person of color, how that affects you, the stress it puts on you, the mental health part, the physical health of being a person of color has on you. And I want to know your view and opinion on that.
To go back to your generational question, I think that's where elders come in. I remember I went to a white liberal arts, very wealthy school in Pennsylvania, Swarthmore College. And the second day that I was on campus, it was so hype, I went to the bookstore and bought the full sweatsuit, full Swarthmore sweatsuit, Swarthmore socks, Scully. I was good. And I'm walking down to the athletic center and hear this guy calling out me and my man that I was with. He was like calling out to us. We were kept walking because this campus I'm supposed to be on. Come to find out, he comes up to us and chastises us for trespassing. And made it clear that certain folk weren't allowed to be on campus at certain times. It was during the summer going right into the freshman year, so barely anybody's on campus anyway, and I'm sitting there in Swarthmore garb
Wow.
that I just bought, and he was telling me that I was trespassing. So you have those moments happen, but it was elders really that helped it. They're the vice president of the school, African-American man who went to Swarthmore as well and was the only African-American there while he was there. I would just sit in his office and just listen to him talk and listen to how he made through and different things that he did and different tactics and things like that. I think there's a mental aspect of being able to survive in the movement and a mental aspect to being able to thrive in that regard, and a lot of that comes through the experience that you can learn from those who have been there and those who can kind of like make sure to show you like, no, you should go through that door. That's the one that makes sense. So I think for me, just having those folk in place, I've always had black males older than I in my space who have been uplifting me, and I think that that's the piece that's been most strengthening for me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Janelle?
Hi, so my name is Janelle Ridley. I am the advisor for the East Boston High chapter as well as a teacher at East Boston High School. One of the questions I have for you in regards to your comments and statements about how to get the generations working on the same path and on the same wavelength as this. I've heard a lot of your comments, and one of the questions I have for you is, do you think time and patience is one of the things that both generations are lacking? Because I'm going to use myself as an example. When I first decided to take on this role as the advisor for the East Boston High chapter, Mr. Michael Curry, who is not here, but is also a great mentor of mine, I called him. I was like, Michael, I work at this high school. I want to do something with these students. I looked through the NAACP on the website, and I want to start a high school chapter. Where are there other high school chapters? What can I do? How do I get this started? Now, I'm not going to talk badly about Michael because I love him dearly, but it took him like several months before he calls me back. I kept calling. I was persistent because it was something I wanted to do. Now, he probably just thought I was, at that time, 27. People just get these ideas and say they want to do things, but actually continuing to do it is another story. Saying you want to do something and actually following it through is two different things. And although he's older than me, I'm not going to say he's old, but he's older than me, he's probably just like, okay, I want to see how far she's going to go with this. And it's the same thing I do with my students. I hear them sometimes, but how many times do we actually stop and listen to what they have to say? Really take that time and patience. And I think with the different generations, everybody's just quick to assume things and speak over each other without actually taking that time and patience to listen to both sides. And what I would like to hear from you is whether or not you think that could be possibly one of the issues. Because just like Michael had to stop and take the time to listen to me, I have to take the time and stop and listen to my students, which is why I took on this role as the advisor and why I am here and why I have my 5-year-old son and put so much work and time and effort into this is because I want them to be able to learn and educate themselves. And one of the things, as this young lady had just stated, is that they don't know. The information, some of us have it, but we don't take the time to stop and spread that knowledge to them. And before I got to that high school, and unfortunately it's like this in a lot of high schools, none of these students even knew what the NAACP was. They take history courses in high school, middle school, and one of them asked me, "Oh, is that a cable TV show?" Like, that's a problem. And if I did not stop and realize that, okay, how did they're sophomores and juniors in high school, and they never heard of the NAACP and they don't know what it's about, you know, how do we expect our older generations? We have to stop and listen to them as well.
So answering the question on the role time and patience on both generations plays in the movement.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's an issue. I mean, we're from the instant gratification generation where we want it now. We want everything now. So yeah, I definitely think that's a key piece to it. But I would submit to you also what you're saying is mentorship. Too often, as Keith said, we're caught up in trying to get our own, and we've lost a sense of community. It's about the individual. I think that's the biggest barrier, is being worried about yourself and not understanding that it's always bigger than you. Thank you. And not being willing to pay it forward, and understanding that, you know, you have to mentor people. My first job when I first moved to DC about 5 years ago was in Ballou Senior High School. And for those who may not be familiar with DC, right, okay, a couple of y'all know, it's in Ward 8, which is the poorest ward in DC, and it's one of the worst schools academically, and actually a student was murdered in the school. Didn't find out any of this until I started, but that's neither here nor there. But I say all that to say, I too went into a classroom and was working with seniors, right? They're about to graduate, and I asked them what I thought was a simple task, to write a reflective essay, and I had students that couldn't form sentences. Right? And so we have to really take a step back and not take everything for granted and understand our own privileges. And I think when we do that and we understand that it's bigger than us and have a sense of community, then, you know, mentoring and taking time out of your busy schedule to help someone else and to build up someone else, it isn't as difficult. And so I would submit that it's really, you know, having a sense of community and understanding the bigger purpose.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are almost out of time. These last two questions we're going to take, if we can make them quick questions.
Absolutely.
And allow the panelists to respond.
Hello, Betty Andrews, president of the Iowa-Nebraska NAACP. I do have two quick things. Number one, I commend you for all the work that you all are doing, but how are you memorializing that work? And I'm particularly interested in the $20,000, the short-term raising of that $20,000. That would be great to capture and share with other people. And then also, because this is the NAACP, I'm very interested in how we turn kind of the internet activist and some of the activists or the young people who are anxious about what's going on in today's world and want to do something. How does that translate into membership? And how do we bridge that gap between the important tradition of the NAACP and the movement and the stature and the brand with what's going on now? Thank you.
So I'll address the membership question after you talk a bit about that money raising.
I'll give the example, and I saw Siobhan in here for 2 seconds ago, but I don't think she might have stepped out. And an example that actually happened with the NAACP, with the primary organization I'm with, Safe Route School National Partnership. We have a national task force that's working on placemaking issues and inequity around the country, about 30 different national and local organizations that work together. And with the health department, we actually came together and did what we called an equity asset map. And we took all these various different organizations, National League of Cities, National Black Caucus of State Legislators, Wisconsin Bike Fed, Advancement Project, all these various different organizations, and we pinpointed where their projects are currently happening around health, around chronic obesity, around placemaking values, around criminal justice. And we mapped all that work that's happening and where they potentially want to work. right? And we did all that and showed those projects so that we could figure out ways to find collaborations on the particular work and where that goes. So there's specific work that's been going on to address, I was talking about the equity asset map that we put together. But there's specific work that's been going on that's codifying some of those best practices and where that work is specifically happening. So I think it's just a matter of just the work that we've been trying to do is get that to the ground so that people can have the tools and the access to be able to make those things happen. But those resources exist. If there's specific things that you might need, holler at me and we can and talk about that. But I think the big thing that we've been trying to do is make sure that there's best practices that are involved and people know exactly how do I access such funding, how do I access such opportunities, and what exactly that looks like.
And to answer the question on membership, I did a presentation at the National Board of Directors meeting last weekend. I think we, as an organization, the NAACP, along with other institutions that are membership driven, we're going to have to catch up to the trends of how this generation thinks about membership and engagement, because there's, for the last 5 years, an organization called Achieve and the Case Foundation have released a study each year examining young people in the workforce. And we really do see that these folks who are engaging online, they're more interested in joining specific causes and supporting specific groups of people than they are in joining larger institutions and organizations. And so that's why under the Youth and Young Adult Game Changer that the board adopted in February, we're going to be looking at how do we create 21st century membership opportunities and experience for young folks, because we know they don't want to sit in a branch meeting, right? They don't want to sit in a local branch meeting. I want to be able to, donate to a drive that I know is going directly to buy supplies or things of that nature. The research also shows us that they want to be able to experience an organization's work in a very tangible, real way without having to go somewhere or be somewhere at a specific time and things of that nature. So I think it's really about creating, not just for the NAACP, but for all institutions and organizations, creating a 21st century organizational model that really does speak to how young folks want to engage in the movement. So really quickly, last question, response from our panelists, and then we'll share some more information.
Okay, I don't have a question, but what I wanted to do is to each and every one of you young men and women is to apologize to you. As a law enforcement officer for 30 plus years now, I started out here in the state of Florida with the City of Fort Pierce Police Department, and now I currently work with I'm employed by the U.S. Department of Justice, Drug Enforcement Administration, and every day, some 30 plus years ago, I went to work hoping to make a difference, especially in our community, and I always stood up for what was right, and what you said is very important. I have always advocated towards the shield, protect and serve, and you're right. Most police departments, including the U.S. Department of Justice at times, we've gotten away from the protect and serve. It's all about stats, seizures, and stuff like that. And I think it's important that you all keep singing your song to America, because I'm just one voice. But to hear you guys express yourself and your concern, it deepens and saddens me, because I know that the job is not done, and I'm going to be gone soon, but it's going to take people like you to keep it moving, because there are not many black law enforcement officers, especially with the U.S. Department of Justice. When I went through the academy in Quantico, Virginia, there were 3 classes from the DEA, I think 4 classes from the FBI, and it averaged maybe 1 out of 40 to 50 people in each class.
Wow.
That's not a lot at all. That's nothing. So if you really want to make a difference too, I would encourage some of you young men and women to go into law enforcement, make a difference that way. Because at the end of the day, there are people like me that, to my own detriment, I've probably been denied promotions because I speak out for people like you and what's wrong. with law enforcement and the way that we do things in some of our policies. So I commend you all.
Thank you for that, sir. Thank you for that. Can you all join me in giving a round of applause to all of our panelists? So one of the things I've shared with the Youth and College Division every year at our annual convention since I began my tenure, I leave the question, if not us, who? If not now, when? And so to the young folks, not only on this stage who are doing the work, but to those of you that are in the audience doing this work, continue that work. It's needed, it's necessary. If not you, who? If not now, when? So thank you all so much for being here. Chairman Brock, will you stand for just a second? If you all will join me in celebrating Chairman Brock, not only for her vision to do this particular session, but for her vision for L5. Can we give her a round of applause? She is supportive not only of the work of the Youth and College Division, but of our youth board members. I know that Mr. John Gaskin is here, who's also a member of the NAACP National Board of Directors from St. Louis, Missouri. Brendan also serves on the national board. Any other youth board members here? I wanted to make sure that I acknowledged you all. So thankful for all of you. This is only the beginning of this conversation. Part 2 of this conversation will happen in Philadelphia, July 11th through the 15th at the 106th NAACP Annual Convention. So make sure you register and meet us in Philly as we continue part 2 of this conversation at the Youth Night Public Mass Meeting under the theme of I Too Sing America. So just wanted to give you some housekeeping notes. We have our concurrent strategy sessions that are beginning at 10:45, so we have about 5 minutes or so to get to those. Those are in the Sewanee rooms. If you go up and back off to your right, you'll see those rooms outside the Sewanee rooms. We have economic empowerment and health running concurrently from 10:45 till noon. Sewanee 15 will be the economic empowerment, surviving the new economy, the 21st century hustle. Sewanee 15. Sewanee 16 will be what if they killed the bill, the impact of politics in race in healthcare reform. That's Sewanee 16. Thank you all so much again for sharing this time with us this morning. Thank you to our panelists, and we'll see you throughout the weekend.